Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be really diving deep into something that I think a lot of us struggle with, honestly.
Yeah.
How do we keep that passion alive, that excitement we have, while we're also dealing with the realities of, well, running a business?
It's a great topic, and I think it's relevant whether you're just starting out or you've been at it for a while. I mean, we all start with this vision, this spark, but then life happens.
Right, like it's one thing to dream about having your own business, but then there's the actual doing it,
Yeah,
right? All the nitty-gritty stuff.
exactly. And that's where I think this deep dive is going to be so valuable. We've got some really interesting source material we're going to be unpacking, a lot of different perspectives on how to keep that initial flame burning, not just for the sake of the business, but for you.
That's such a good point. It's easy to get so caught up in the day-to-day that we forget to take care of ourselves. Like, what's the point of having this amazing business if we're completely burnt out?
Exactly. It's about finding that balance. And,
Right.
a lot of the sources we looked at emphasize that balance is key, not just for long-term success, but for, like you said, your own well-being.
Totally. It's like you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. And that's why this whole idea of passion is so crucial. Because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, it's going to be really hard to sustain it, over the long haul, especially when things get tough.
Okay, so I have a question for you, because this is something I struggle with personally.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even figure out what your passions are?
That's a great question. I think it starts with really taking some time for introspection, like looking inward. What are the things that truly light you up? What are you naturally drawn to?
That makes sense. But it's more than just what we like to do in our spare time.
Right. It has to be something that you're not only passionate about, but also something that you can see yourself doing, like day in and day out, something that you can build a business around.
So, like, I might love to bake, but maybe opening a bakery isn't actually the right fit for me.
Maybe, maybe not. It depends on your personality, your skills, your lifestyle. There are a lot of factors to consider. But one of our sources had this really interesting point. They said, sometimes it's not about finding your passion, it's about creating it.
Whoa, that's a different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So, like, we don't necessarily have to have this pre-existing passion. We can kind of cultivate it as we go.
Exactly. And that ties into something else that came up in our research, this idea that it's not just about passion, it's about purpose too. Like, what kind of impact do you want to make in the world?
Okay, I'm really liking this. So, we've got passion and purpose. What else is there? Because I know it takes more than just a good idea and some enthusiasm to build a successful business, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things get a little more practical, I guess you could say. One of the sources we looked at made a really good point. They said, passion without a plan is just a dream.
Okay, that's a good one. Passion without a plan is just a dream. I'm writing that down. So, what kind of plan are we talking about here?
Well, it starts with understanding the basics of business. Things like marketing, finance, operations, all that good stuff.
Right. Because you can have the most amazing product or service in the world, but if you don't know how to market it or manage your money, you're not going to get very far.
That's right. And I think a lot of people get intimidated by this part. Like, they think they need to have an MBA or something to start a business.
Or they get overwhelmed by all the things they don't know. Right?
Exactly. But the good news is that there's so many resources available these days, like online courses, workshops, mentors. You can learn pretty much anything you need to know.
So it's more about having a willingness to learn and adapt as you go.
Exactly. And I think that's a key part of the entrepreneurial journey. You're constantly learning and growing. It's a process.
So we've talked about passion, purpose, and the practical side of things. Is there anything else we should be thinking about at this stage, like before we even start putting together a business plan?
Yes. One of our sources had this amazing suggestion, and it was this idea of creating a passion map.
Okay, I love that. A passion map. Tell me everything.
Well, it's basically a visual brainstorming tool that helps you explore your passions and see how they might connect to a potential business idea.
So it's like a map of all the things that light you up?
Exactly. And it can be as simple or as elaborate as you want it to be. You can use a whiteboard, a piece of paper, or even just a bunch of sticky notes.
Okay, I'm definitely going to try this. But I'm curious, how do you actually create a passion map? Like, what are the steps?
Okay, so you start by listing out all your passions. Like, literally anything that comes to mind. Don't censor yourself. Just let it flow.
Okay, so I've got my list of passions. What's next?
Then you start asking yourself some questions about each passion, like, what do I love about this? What skills do I have that relate to this? What needs does this passion fulfill for me?
Okay, so I'm starting to dig deeper now, connecting my passions to my skills and my needs. I can see how this is starting to take shape.
Right. And the next step is to think about how those passions and skills could potentially translate into a business idea. Like, what problems could you solve? What needs could you meet for other people?
This is getting me so excited. I can already see the wheels turning. But let's be real, even with all this passion and a killer passion map, it's still going to be tough to balance the demands of a business with, well, life, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's something that every entrepreneur struggles with. But the good news is that there are a lot of strategies and tools that can help. And that's what we're going to be diving into next.
Can't wait. This is already so helpful. Thanks for breaking it down for us.
You got it. So let's talk about some of those strategies for balancing passion and the practical side of running a business, all those demands that come with it.
Yeah, because I think a lot of us get really excited about the big idea, but then the day-to-day stuff can feel, I don't know, kind of overwhelming.
Totally. And that's where things like setting boundaries come in.
Boundaries, okay.
Yeah.
What kind of boundaries?
Well, it can be as simple as setting specific work hours, like deciding that, from 6 p.m. onwards, you're off the clock. You're not checking emails. You're not answering calls.
Yeah, I think that's a big one for a lot of entrepreneurs. It's so easy to just be on all the time,
Yeah.
especially when you're passionate about what you're doing.
Right. And that's a recipe for burnout. One of the sources we looked at talked about this idea of digital detox, where you completely disconnect from all your devices for a certain period of time each day.
Oh, I like that. Digital detox. I could definitely use some of that. But boundaries aren't just about time, right?
No, they're also about energy, like being mindful of what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to.
That whole power of no thing. It's
Mhm.
so hard, though, especially when it feels like every opportunity is, potentially a big break.
I know, but one of our sources had this really interesting perspective on it. They said, every time you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something else.
Whoa, that's a mind bender. So, if I say yes to working late on a project, I'm saying no to, I don't know, having dinner with my family.
Exactly. And it's about being conscious of those choices and making sure that you're aligning your actions with your values and your priorities.
Okay, so boundaries are about time and energy. What other strategies did our sources recommend?
Well, this one might sound a bit obvious, but it's amazing how many entrepreneurs neglect it.
Yeah.
Taking care of your physical and mental health.
Right, what's the point of building a successful business if you're too exhausted or stressed to enjoy it?
Exactly. And this doesn't have to be anything super complicated. It can be as simple as making sure you're getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, and moving your body.
Yeah, I've noticed that when I'm taking care of myself, I'm way more productive and creative, and I'm less likely to get bogged down by the stressful stuff.
Right. And it's not just about preventing burnout. It's also about maintaining that passion and that energy that got you started in the first place.
Totally. So self-care is key.
Right.
What else?
Well, a lot of the sources talked about the importance of finding support systems, like surrounding yourself with people who understand what you're going through and can offer encouragement and advice.
Yeah, that makes sense, because entrepreneurship can be a pretty lonely journey at times.
It can. And having a network of people you can trust, whether it's other entrepreneurs, mentors, or even just friends and family who are supportive, can make a huge difference.
Totally agree. And it doesn't have to be formal, right? I have a few entrepreneur friends who I just text with regularly, and it's so helpful to just vent or bounce ideas off of each other.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you. And I think that's a good reminder in general. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to this whole balance thing. It's about experimenting and finding what works for you and your unique circumstances.
So true. We're all different, and our businesses are all different. What works for one person might not work for another. Okay, so we've got boundaries, self-care, and support systems. Anything else? I feel like there must be a million tips and tricks out there.
There are. And this next one is a bit more tactical, but I think it's super important for staying organized and on top of things. A lot of the sources we looked at recommended using project management tools and automation to streamline your workflow.
Oh, yes. I am all about those productivity hacks. I live and breathe by my to-do list app.
Me too. And there are so many great tools out there, like Trello, Asana, Monday.com, just to name a few.
Yeah. They're lifesavers. They help me keep track of all the moving parts of my business, and it frees up my mental energy to focus on the creative stuff.
No, exactly. And that's the whole point, right? It's about using technology to your advantage so that you can work smarter, not harder.
Totally. And speaking of working smarter, another tip that came up in our research was the importance of delegating tasks. learning to let go of the things that you don't have to do yourself.
Oh, this is huge. I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with this, especially in the beginning. Like, they feel like they have to do everything themselves.
Yeah, I know I did. I had this control freak mentality. Like, if I want it done right, I have to do it myself.
Right. And that's a surefire way to burn yourself out. But the truth is, you don't have to be a superhero. It's okay to ask for help.
Okay, so how do we get over that fear of delegating? Because I think a lot of us worry about losing control, you know?
I get it. But here's the thing. Delegating doesn't mean giving up control. It's about finding the right people to do the right tasks. And it's about communicating clearly and setting expectations.
So it's more about building a team and empowering other people to do what they do best.
Exactly. And that frees you up to focus on the things that only you can do, the things that you're most passionate about.
I love that reframing. It makes delegation seem less like a loss of control and more like an expansion of possibilities. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Boundaries, self-care, support systems, using technology, delegating tasks. Is there anything else we should keep in mind as we're navigating this whole passion-business balance thing?
Well, one of the sources we looked at had this really powerful message, and it was about remembering your why.
Our why. That's a good one.
Yeah. Like, why did you start this business in the first place? What were those initial dreams and goals that you had? What impact did you want to make?
Because it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind and lose sight of that bigger vision, right?
It is. And that's why it's so important to regularly reconnect with your why. Whether it's through journaling, meditation, or just taking some time to reflect.
Yeah, like a little pep talk with yourself, reminding yourself of what you're working towards and why it matters. Okay, I'm loving all of this, but I'm also curious to hear about some real-life examples of entrepreneurs who are, actually making this whole balance thing work.
Me too. And I think that's a great segue into the next part of our deep dive. We're going to be looking at some inspiring stories of entrepreneurs who have found ways to build successful businesses while also prioritizing their well-being and their passions.
Can't wait. I'm ready for a dose of motivation. Hit me with some success stories. So I'm ready for those inspiring stories. Lay them on me.
Okay, so one that really stuck with me was this guy. He was a total tech whiz. But you know what he was really passionate about?
What's that?
Sustainable living. Like off-the-grid, eco-friendly kind of stuff.
Interesting. So how did those two things, come together? How did he make a business out of that?
Well, he started tinkering, building these DIY solar panels and wind turbines for his own house.
Okay, so he's like a modern-day homesteader, but with tech skills.
Exactly. And people started noticing, his neighbors, his friends, and they were like, hey, can you make one of those for me? And that's kind of how it all started.
So he was solving a problem, right?
Sure.
People wanted to be more eco-friendly,
yeah,
but they didn't necessarily have the know-how to do it themselves.
Exactly. And he was able to tap into that need, but also stay true to his passion. I mean, it wasn't just about making money for him. It was about making a difference.
I love that. It's like his business was an extension of his values, but I'm guessing it wasn't all smooth sailing, right? Like going from, building stuff in your garage to running a full-fledged business.
Oh, no, definitely not. He had to learn a lot along the way, about things like marketing, sales, managing a team, all that stuff we talked about earlier.
Yeah, all the practical stuff.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that he actually found a way to incorporate his passion for sustainability into every aspect of his business. He sourced all his materials locally, used recycled packaging, even powered his whole office with renewable energy.
So he was walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Totally. And I think that authenticity really resonated with his customers. They knew that he wasn't just trying to sell them something, he was actually living his values. And that made a huge difference.
So it's like that whole purpose thing we were talking about earlier, right? People can tell when you're genuinely passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it makes them want to support you.
Exactly. And this guy, he actually built his business to a point where he was able to step back from the day-to-day operations. He hired a team to handle a lot of the management stuff, and that allowed him to focus on the things that he was really good at and that he really enjoyed, like product development and, kind of like the visionary stuff.
So he was able to create a business that gave him more freedom, not less. That's the dream, right?
It is, and it's totally possible. It just takes, planning and intentionality.
Okay, I'm feeling super inspired now. I want to go out and start building my dream business right now. But I also know that it's not going to happen overnight, and there are going to be challenges along the way. So any final words of wisdom for our listeners who are on this journey?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to just remember to enjoy the ride. Entrepreneurship is a roller coaster, but it's also an incredible adventure.
It is, and it's so much more rewarding when you're doing something you love.
Exactly. So don't be afraid to take risks, to experiment, to learn from your mistakes. And most importantly, don't forget to celebrate your wins, no matter how small they may seem.
Love that. Celebrate the wins. I think that's a great takeaway. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. This has been such an insightful and inspiring conversation.
It's been my pleasure, and thanks to all of you for listening.
And that's a wrap on another Deep Dive. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to all the resources we mentioned, and be sure to tune in next time for more entrepreneurial wisdom and inspiration. Until then, keep chasing those dreams.